Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the first episode of Adobo and Avocados for this year, 2024. I'm Marie Cruz, and today, as always, I have my amazing sidekick. Introduce yourself.
That's me. I'm Nicole van der Hoeven. I am coming to you live from the Netherlands this time. And I'd also like to welcome to the stream Tara over there.
Hello. How are you
Yeah,
guys today?
we're doing okay. Yeah,
We're
this
getting
is
there, still
we're
starting
getting
up from
there.
the new year.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a
Did you
little
went?
little crazy of a
Yeah.
start to the year, but
Yeah. I was gonna say, cause like when I went back to work last week, I felt it was still an adjustment period. I was trying to figure out like where my stuff was. I'm like, hey, where did I put that document? And I'm just trying to keep myself organized again. But this week, yeah, it was much better than last week in terms of the organization. So I felt like last week I was still like trying to come back after all the festivities.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel the same way where you take that time off for the holidays and then you're like, what was I doing?
Yeah, I think that Januaries are kind of like Mondays, but for the year, it's like there's good and bad sides to it. It's like
Yeah.
the whole fresh start feeling. It makes you feel like, hey, this is your chance. You can, start off the year right and institute habits that are
Yeah.
going to change your life in a positive way. But there's also the negative side where, like all that progress and momentum that you were building towards, it's gone now, and now you have
Mhm.
to start building it again. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like
Yes.
we have to try to veer towards making it more positive, but you know what? Januaries are hard.
Yeah.
Well, I would love that fresh start if you actually got a fresh start. I feel like we always bring so much like technical debt
Baggage.
and half finished projects and things with us that it's like, it's not really a fresh start because I have all this other stuff that I'm bringing with. But I also want to start all this new stuff. So,
Yes.
That's dangerous.
yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, Tara, so would you like to introduce yourself? Like, what do you
Sure.
do? And what's that amazing thing on the top of your head?
Oh, yes, my tiaras. So I'm Tara Walton. I always hate trying to introduce myself because I'm generally just kind of a jack of all trades. I like to do so many things. I've been an automation developer for 10 years. A couple years ago, I started on the community building side at DevRel. So I've done a bit of that, public speaking. But this is pretty much a constant for me. It's my tiaras. So my handle is Tara with tiaras. If you just Google that, you'll find all my stuff. Uh, but it's kind of my I was telling Nicole earlier, it's kind of like my security blanket when I'm having a bad day or I feel like I need like a power boost. You put the tiara on, the posture gets a little bit better. You're like, yeah, I could do this. And so it started off as a way to be able to speak in public without getting super nervous and things like that. And now it's just kind of become part of me.
I
I
love
love
that so
that.
much. I'm like one button away from purchasing my first ever tiara.
I
I'm
think
good to do it.
everyone should have at least one item. If it's not a tiara for you, if it's a tie, a set of earrings, something that just gives you that like,
Mm,
I can do this today. Like,
yeah.
everybody should have that one item. I'm particular to tiaras, so I think you should get one.
Well, I think we do something similar. We kind of framed it a different way. You said it's like a security blanket, right? So Maria and I are Filipino. We love food. We're very stereotypical in that way. So of course we went to food immediately. And the reason that the name of the show is Adobo and Avocados is because adobo is a Filipino dish, and it hardly matters what it is, but what it
Mhm.
means to us is home, like the comfort of
Mm.
home. And it's something that you can make wherever you are. Maria and I have neither of us has lived in the Philippines for a very long time. We both are in Europe. And so like sometimes it's nice to have like this real comfort food, like a security blanket. So I
Oh,
guess, would you
absolutely.
say that tiaras are kind of like your adobo, or?
Um, a little bit. I mean, it is definitely something that I carry with me when I travel. I usually have at least one. It's almost as important as making sure your phone is with you, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but what gives me that sense of home is like my family always grew up playing a lot of games. We would have dinner and then we would play cards or we'd play Scrabble.
Mm.
So when I go to conferences or I'm meeting people for the first time and we can sit down and play a card game or crank out a board game, like that's my immediate comfort zone. And I love the conversations that flow out when you're just, playing Monopoly. You find out so much about people when you're doing weird side tasks that don't really mean much of anything, but you get to really connect. That's what I love about this.
I
Mm.
I also love playing board games with family. I still play like role-playing games with family every week, and it is something that it's like a social lubricant, you know. It's not
Yeah,
like if you said we had to sit down and play for 3 hours straight and talk for 3 hours straight, I would feel like we'd run out of
it's a
steam
lot
or
of pressure.
whatever.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very like full on, but it's like, "Hey, let's just play a game, and while we're playing, tell me what's been going on."
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and
There's
it's just
something
so
about
comforting to
that.
be able to sit down and with that, like you said, without that level of pressure of like, we have to fill this 3 hours. You look up and you go, wow, has it been that long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that goes as well, like not just like playing with family, but if you introduce like playing a game, let's say you're meeting a new team, like you're part of a new team, and that's one way, to break the ice to get to know your team members. You can also do that virtually. So if you work in a remote office, like there's no physical office that you can like go to, I think having that way of a team event, but then through board games or through something else, and you don't have to talk about work. I think that's very important, especially today. Yeah.
Yes, and none of those weird icebreakers, right? Like two truths and a lie. Like I think all of us absolutely hate that.
Yeah.
I love that you started this with that concept, because I actually think, and we're getting sort of into the topic of today, that I think I think that communities might be built on a sense of play. What do you think of that?
I like that. I talk a lot about all of us having kind of a role that we play. You said that you play role playing games, so I actually talk a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, and that we're all kind of on this quest. And you would never take a group of one type of character into a quest. You want a variety of people, and you want a variety of perspectives. And so, if we can look at our teams that way, and kind of you know give up the idea of failure, right? We're just going on a quest. It's fine. What we find is what we find. It alleviates a lot of that, like, but I have to do it right, and so's not on time, and you can kind of relax and figure it out together. um, the personalities can come out, everybody can shine in their best light. So I really like the idea that it's kind of all based on play.
Yeah, because I think that when we think of play, we think about it as something that's not serious. But
Mhm.
I think play can absolutely be serious, and we see that naturally going from, like, when you look at how children play to how adults play. It really is the same thing. We just, maybe add more rules or care a little bit more about the outcome, but I think that underlying all of that, all of these trappings of mechanics or who wins or who loses, is this primal sense of like wanting to escape for a little bit, but also contribute productively while having a little bit of fun.
Oh, definitely. And I think through my years of working in QA, I hate people that say that QA are out to break things. We're out to play with it. We want to see, what does this button do and what happens if I do this. We're not maliciously trying to break it, but we're genuinely curious and just playing with the features that you gave us. So I love that.
That can probably tie in to my next question, because you mentioned a while ago that you've been an automation developer for 10 years. And then you said you've also started out doing QA. Tell us a bit about your career background. So, how did you get into tech? How did you get into the current role that you are doing?
So I got into tech. I don't know if accidentally is the right word. I'd always wanted to go. So I always wanted to go into tech. I was one of those kids that, as soon as they gave us like Oregon Trail in school, I was like, this is great. Like, I want to spend all my time in the computer lab. you know, I thought I was going to go into that. And at that point in time, I watched so many people going into tech. It was kind of that first big tech boom, the .coms and all of the first applications that became real big. And somewhere in the back of my brain, it went, oh, this is going to be like a flooded market by the time you like graduate college and can join the workforce. So I didn't do it. I went a different route. And when my employer said, you can't really climb up the corporate ladder anymore until you go back to school and finish your degree. I went for a degree in mathematics, and I walked out with a degree in mathematics and computer science that I got accidentally filling my schedule in. I was waiting on course rotations to come around, and so I took a programming class, and then I took another one, and then I took another one, and pretty soon they were like, did you know that you finished a bachelor's? I was like, oops, not what I was going for. Uh, and I've always just loved it. I fell into QA much the same way. I thought I was going to be a developer, and I really liked designing websites and the experience that people have when when you can spend hours on a website. And I had been a beta tester for video games for a really long time. And then I was a TA, and I found that I was just really good at the analytical side of it. And I really enjoyed doing it. So I went into QA. And I've done that for a long time. When I became a community builder and a DevRel, which is what I do now, it was because I didn't have any of that. I went so long without having my tribe and without having any community to speak of. It was a very siloed role. I live in the Midwest of the United States, not a tech hub by any stretch of the imagination. So there's not a lot of QA people here. There's not a lot of women in tech here. And I was very isolated. So when I got the ability to not only join communities, but then to drive them forward, it was just, oh, this is what I wish I had always had. Let's build the things that I've missed so much and wish that I would have had at my fingertips when I started my career.
So Marie and I are developer advocates. I'm just curious because you mentioned developer relations. Do you see that as the same thing or similar? I mean, different people have different
I know.
opinions of it.
It's such a blurry line, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a little bit more of the business side in developer relations. I think it's a lot more, in my experience, it's been a lot more product driven. But most of the work I've done in communities have been product-based communities. On the flip side of that, because I do come from QA, I have so much of my advocacy is towards quality and breaking down those silos that I saw and building teams that, for me, they're very blurry and kind of right hand, left hand. But I do know some people that draw like a very defined line of this is advocacy and this is relations. But I think you can't really have one without the other for me.
Yeah. So I kind of think of it in the same way, really, but I'm not offended if people think that they're different. But I think with this whole, whether it's developer advocacy or relations, I think broadly there are usually three different pillars that you can go into, and some people do multiple ones, or some people go into one or two. And I think that
Mhm.
they're usually content, product, and community. So would you say you mentioned product and community are the things that you gravitate towards?
I think for the most part, I've always been in product-based communities. Um, But I think for me, it's kind of like having a focus in one, but you kind of have to have a little bit of each of the others. Community is definitely one of the bigger pillars for me. You're if you're not going to have the community there to support you when you're learning a new programming language or picking up a new tool, then it's so much harder and it's so much more frustrating. And does that mean you'll stick with it? And, there's so much stuff that comes along with that I think it's really important to have that community pillar in there. But I don't think that if you're not focused on the product, whatever that might be, or, the people, the technical aspect of it, if you don't understand what's going on behind the surface of whatever you're working with, then you can't strengthen up that pillar that means the most to you.
Yeah. And I think that's one of like the reasons like why the role developer advocates have been created, because I think like traditionally people from like a sales background or like a marketing background, um they will speak to like prospect users, but then the users would actually prefer to speak to someone that they can relate to. And I think the developer advocacy really comes into that picture, because we're representing them essentially, and it's things that we've done, like we've done the part that you were struggling with, and here's how we can help. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important, because if it's like, and this is in no way me talking bad in terms of the sales and marketing, but I think it in terms of connecting to developers more, then me personally, I think I would feel much more like comfortable if I'm speaking to someone who has actually been in my shoes.
I completely agree. I think for the most part, I've noticed that developers in particular really don't want to be sold to, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're usually not the one that holds the purse strings. We're not the one that gets to make the decision ultimately. So don't try to sell something to me. But being able to connect over, I built this too, I had that same problem. Those are the conversations that you get that empathetic connection where you're like, oh yeah, I've done that too. It drove me crazy for months. Let me show you what I did. Maybe it'll help you in your journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowledge
And I
sharing.
think that's the difference, right? Like when we're if we were marketers, we might have a different idea of a community, and I don't know if it would really be a community as much as an audience. It's like a one-way thing. But a community seems to me to be more interactive. It's not just us telling people like here's what the product is. It's more like, hey, what are you working on? And developing this dialogue and actually being interested in it and participating without preconceived ideas of what you need to get out of this.
Yeah. And I like that you said, really participating. I think one of the things that I see that fails in a lot of communities is not actually being a part of the community that you're in. Like,
Mm.
I am a notorious lurker. If you look at my Slack and my Discord, I have probably 20 on each one that I maybe glance at once in a while. But the ones that are really near and dear to my heart, I'm active in, I'm talking to people. Even if you're just checking in and going, hey, did you ever figure that out? I'd love to, I came across a similar problem, or, and being a part of the community, especially if you're the community builder side of it, right? If you're the one that's driving that community, marketing kind of comes along with it. Like, oh, this is that feature that is behind our paywall, but I think it would be perfect for you because of
Mm.
XYZ. Versus, here, let me sell it to you, even though you might not need it. Um, and I think there's so much to be said about those genuine connections of like, I know that you love plants as much as I do, and I saw this and it made
Mm.
me think of you. And then when there's that comfort feeling of coming back and saying, I know we talked last time about this, but I have a question for you. And
Mhm.
there's so much more comfort in that than going to somebody who's just going to try to sell you something, or somebody who's never had to build that app and goes, I don't know, let me go find out for you.
I just
Mm.
realized that you both have plants in your background. I'm like, I have a Lego plant.
I love your Lego.
I think it still counts.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you've mentioned, Tara, like in terms of like the role community builder. Um, I don't know if that's a role that a lot of people have heard of, but how do you become a community builder? Do you need a certification, or do you need specific skills? Can you just transfer from one discipline to another? Is there a pathway? I'm
So,
extremely
so I think
curious.
you are a community builder, right? It's not so much a title as a I still don't see it so there is a title of community builder. Um, but it's a personality trait, right? Are you somebody
Mm,
that connects other people? Do you have those conversations and then go, "Oh, Marie, you need to meet Nicole. You guys would get along so well,"
mm,
right? If you're kind of that matchmaker and can find those common threads and connect people, you're a community builder, right?
mm,
There are certifications that you can go out there and get. I don't hold any of them. I don't have any certifications at all. Something I want to remedy for 2024. Um, but it's that intrinsic thing that you're drawn to for me.
mm,
I love talking to people. When I was writing code all day in a cubicle with noise canceling headphones on, I practically went insane. I missed people and talking to each other and seeing what you did with that cool thing that you were building last weekend. And I didn't have any of that. So coming back to being able to advocate for quality and advocate for my product and work in that relations space, but have this wonderful community that I could talk to and commiserate with and troubleshoot with was really where it was at for me.
yeah.
Where would you even start? Like, let's say you're starting completely from scratch. How would you even begin? Maybe it's, I mean, I think it would be a little bit easier now. Let's say if you joined a company that was in testing, you already have some people that you know, or you have a network. But what if you had nothing? Where would you start?
Sure. So if you're, say starting from scratch with a company, um, you already have people that have kind of formed their own community. I guarantee they're out there. There are people that have run into each other at conferences, or people that have found each other on Reddit or Stack Overflow or something, because they've gone out there and asked that question and started those conversations. So for me, it was about finding those people that were kind of already your champions, already your MVP type personalities that are using your stuff,
Mm,
and elevating them and asking them, hey, what are you missing? What do you want? What would you like to see? Do you want us to host events where you can get together? Do you want us to create a forum for you? Tell me what you need that I can make your life easier. Uh, from there, I mean, and when I walked into Provar, they had said, we hired you because our people have already been saying they want a community, and we don't, like, none of us have the bandwidth for that. Where do we start with it? We kind of have ideas. And so people want that anyway. So it's a matter of going out and kind of finding those people and pulling them together and making an action plan. If you've ever, been really into a video game and joined their Slack channel or their Discord, you've already seen how people just they will gravitate towards it. They find it because we all want community in our lives. We all want to belong somewhere. So
mhm. I think I like just referring back to what you said a while ago, it's more of like it's not really like a I don't know, like a specific role, but it's more of like a personality trait. Because I think all of us here, like I don't, for example, call myself as a community builder, but hearing how you've defined what a community builder does, it's all really about connecting people to other people who might share like similar interests, or it could be if someone approach you and you can't for whatever reason um attend that talk or be a speaker, then a community builder would also say, but hey, why don't you reach out to Nicole or to Tara, because they might also speak about a similar topic. So at least you're also giving them recommendations. Um,
Yeah.
from a company perspective, because you mentioned that Provar hired you because the community really wanted this. I'm just curious to know, like, how did it exactly help the company? So in this particular example, how did the role help Provar?
Mm. So I think it's the same in any company that I've seen, really. When you start to get people together that have common interests or work in the same verticals, because Provar's in the Salesforce space, and I'm drawing a blank. It's pre-coffee for me. You guys are in the EU. It's very early for me. um, but in some of the
I
other
just want to
places,
say
you end
some
up.
of us are in the EU, not others.
Oh, okay.
Marie chose to leave us, but anyway.
Betrayal. um, but there are so many, like, the JavaScript community out there is insanely huge, right? There are a
Mhm.
lot of people that live and breathe JavaScript, and it covers so many different things. So finding somebody in the JavaScript world is easy. Finding somebody in the JavaScript world that does test automation for healthcare, that's that connection, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to connect and find kind of micro communities that can help each other and
Mm.
make people grow and feel more comfortable with your product or your language or whatever it is that you're working with, whatever your community is. That's where a lot of the value comes in. So it's not creating connections for the sake of connections or creating content for the sake of activity KPIs. It's about bringing value to the people that need it. One of my favorite communities that I belong to is my Dungeons and Dragons community. And we just talk about character ideas and stupid math formulas because I didn't know how to calculate the damage for this, or, and it's just completely random conversations. But it's because
What
we all have
character do
that
you play?
shared, oh gosh, it's that shared interest. I play a really clumsy rogue. I'll tell you all about her. Sometimes she's not a very good rogue.
Awesome. I just played D&D last night actually, or this morning because it goes past midnight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a great example of something where this community is around the game really. But the
Mhm.
community is there's also like this meta layer to it where it's no longer about the game. At some point, it shifts from like, hey, I just need an answer to this question to
Mhm.
like, hey, you're actually pretty cool. Like even outside of the game, you are
Absolutely.
interested in a lot of the same things that I'm interested in. So like in my gaming group now, we got together because of the game because we just wanted to play this rule set, but now we talk about a whole lot of other things, and
Mhm.
we have discovered other common interests in fiction and literature and things like that that we never, it wasn't the point, right? But these things develop beyond the initial thing that the community was built around.
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen things that have come out of it, partnerships and applications that people have made because somebody started asking a question, they got along really well. Now they have this side project and it became a talk at a conference. I'm like, I didn't even know you guys knew each other. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, like, when you are starting a community, I think creating it might be, much more easier. I'm not saying it's like easy, but I think if we compare it to actually maintaining relationships, because forming that relationship part, I think maintaining that will always be hard. Sorry, you can see my dog in the background.
Hi,
um
Patty.
but for example, because I know we now live in a digital age, how how do you, as a community builder, for example, can help launch a technical community forum? Because I think that's one way of really interacting with your users, trying to help them with any issues that they are facing. But if you don't have any of those knowledge, like how do you start that?
Oh yeah. Well, none of us are ever going to know anything about our project language, etc. That would just be impossible. Um, so for me, the first steps that I always try to do is to find those champions that it's like, who would I go to if I were asking this question, and getting them involved. And I never try to ask for something for free. I'm not above bribes, right? Like, so it's somebody that uses my product, let's see if I can get them some sort of discount or swag or whatever they're interested in, for helping out. A lot of people actually want to. I had one of my community members that I will never forget what he said. He told me that he was so active in the community because he was trying to build the community that he always wanted. And that was early on in my DevRel career. I really thought that was very important. It stuck with me. And so being that active member that says, I don't know the answer to that, but she does, or I don't know, so-and-so was working on a similar project, maybe they'll know. And having that kind of network knowledge to be able to reach out to the right people and not be afraid of saying, I don't know that answer, but I might know who does. Eventually the community becomes something that you don't have to drive yourself anymore, because it will start off as you're doing all the work, especially when it's brand new. But it'll go from, I have to do all this work, I have to go research these answers, I have to make these posts, to, wow, I didn't even see that yet and it's already been answered. And so-and-so's already jumped on that because they knew I was going to tag them. Like, so.
Yeah. We have an like an interesting question here from Fernando. What's more challenging, growing a community or keeping people engaged?
That is a very good question. I would like to say that they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Um, Growing a community is going to be about getting people engaged. And that's almost a little bit easier because you kind of have a clean slate. But keeping people engaged and keeping people coming back, is like starting fresh every day. There has to be a reason to go back to it. You have to have a little bit of that, like, what am I missing? What did I not see today? Maybe that answer is there, or maybe a new idea is there that I need to go find out. So it's almost the same activity, right? Of making sure there's a value add that people want to come back, that people want to engage in, is going to keep people coming back, but it's also going to make people say, hey, I joined this community. I think you would get a lot of value out of it. You should come with me. Or being able to say, I've got some people in there that I think would benefit from your knowledge, or that you would benefit from. You should join the community as well. So those same activities do a little bit of both. I think keeping people engaged might be a smidge harder, just because, as you start to get bigger and bigger and have more resources at your fingertips, coming up with something new and making sure that that important information is at the top of the stack is a little bit challenging.
I really agree with that. And I also think that maybe thinking of things in terms of growth can sometimes be detrimental. I think if you focus on providing value, everything else will come, because really the problem with growth is that it's measured in the metrics that are used to measure it are very black and white, and that's not the value of a community. It's not like, how good is this community? Well, it's 8 out of 10. We don't really think of it like that. How do you
Absolutely.
quantify the depth of human interaction? So I think that it's almost a bit counterintuitive to plan for growth, or to have that as one of your goals, and instead maybe just think about providing value, and everything else will follow suit.
It's very true. And it's a hard sell sometimes for your C-suite that they do tend to think of things in revenue numbers and growth metrics. And so swapping that narrative over to, and that's a wonderful thing to keep track of, but we're dealing with humans here, not, the AI, like we can see how many times this API has been hit. It's not that kind of metric. We have to say, 100 people have clicked on this article, but 5 of them spent more than 2 seconds on it. And so only 5 people really read it, and keeping track of a different idea of that important metric of growth, of how much value did we get? Is that value getting better? Is that value growing versus, well, we have more people. Great, but nobody's actually doing anything here. Nobody's talking to each other.
Yeah. I
It's
think
kind
that's
of like,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
sorry, I was just gonna say, like, it's kind of like the difference now in social networks. I read a post recently from someone from the TTRPG community, actually, Mike Shea from Sly Flourish. He said that on X, formerly Twitter, he had 40,000 subscribers. He has since moved to Mastodon, where I think he said he has 2,000 followers. And he said he hasn't regretted that choice, and I know personally, having also made the switch, the depth of interactions on Mastodon are unrivaled. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I got a lot more people who would like stuff or whatever or heart them on Twitter, but on Mastodon, I've developed friendships. I've gotten real nuanced commentary on things that I post, or like the real conversation. So it's like, does the number really matter? Not to me, but you have to be clear on what kind of community you're looking for, because it is also valid to say, like, hey, we need this community to increase the number of customers or whatever, but just be clear on that from the beginning, and then you can tailor it accordingly.
Yeah. And it's very much about the story of it. I find that being able to spin those numbers and find out what they really mean, like finding out how long somebody is actually on there. When I built a forum, a lot of forum technologies, whatever software you pick, has the ability to see like read time. How long was somebody on this article? I'm sure I throw those metrics off all the time because I leave them open in another tab. It's just on this other screen over here. So people probably hate me for that. But knowing that the average read time on an article is, 1 second means, wow, this did not hit well. This is not helpful to anybody. So yeah, we've cranked out a bunch of articles and we've put out a lot of blogs that we thought were great content, but only 2 of them are being read. That's going to let me say, okay, people are looking for this kind of content more. There's something missing in our documentation, or there's a problem in the feature, or, so we can turn around and connect with the company a little bit more and say, hey, we found a lot of people looking for this article and spending a lot of time coming back and reading it over and over again. So there's something going on here that we need to look into. There's either a bug, or there's lack of training, or there's no documentation. And so we give that chance to kind of improve the experience of everybody in our community, and maybe alleviate some headaches for some members of the team, our customer success managers and our product developers who have been saying, we don't know which one's more important. I can tell you which one our community is asking for.
Yeah. I think we've been talking about community like it's just one thing, but when I already mentioned like the whole X and Mastodon fragmentation, you've talked about forums. Um, I think maybe we can talk about the fragmentation of communities as well, because for most companies, there's not one place or platform that the community as a whole stays on. There might be some people who just prefer to hang out on Discourse, or some people always raise issues in the GitHub repo, or some people are on Discord. Like, how do you encourage this fragmentation, do you think? Or is it kind of a matter of, hey, wherever people want to go, let's encourage them to go there? Or should we want to consolidate them on a single platform?
So I think it is a double-edged sword because I always want to meet people where they're already at, right? I don't want to create a whole new system for them if they all live on GitHub or if they all spend most of their time on Discord. I don't want to be like, okay, that's great, but all of our stuff is over here now. Right? So I want to meet them where they're at. But that might mean a lot of cross-posting. So trying to update your documentation, but then post something in your Discord that says, hey, I know you guys have had a lot of trouble with this. Thank you for your feedback. We've updated it. Here's the link. Right. So that if it is fragmented, there's at least one place that people can say, okay, I don't know where to find this, but I'm pretty sure I could go find where to find it on their Discord server. I can find, everything's in their documentation base, even if it sends me to a YouTube link. you know, those kinds of things that lets us take our fragmentations and make it a little bit more accessible. I always like to have at least one source of what I call the source of truth, right? So if you end up having a great conversation and this is the way that people have said, okay, that doesn't work, but this does, go and update your documentation. Get somebody to review those steps and say, you know what, that does work 100% of the time instead of 90% of the time. Let's update this. And so really working with your cross-functional team members, all the buzzwords in there, and having a really good internal community is going to help your external community too, and vice versa.
Yeah. I really agree in terms of the internal community because maybe we can share, Nicole, that like last year in K6 and in Grafana, we actually started a champions program. Internally, we have communicated that it's something that the team, I think, have been wanting as well because we have acknowledged that the community is growing. We were looking at other, I guess, like software testing companies or other companies out there that do provide like a championship program or an ambassador program. And so having a really strong internal community, it's really vital because you've mentioned a while ago that when you have, I don't know, like 10,000 or how many users, there is in the community, but then no one is really interacting, then that's not really a good metric to consider. Yes, you do have a big community in terms of the numbers, but are you actually providing value to them? Are you actually listening to, hey, this is what one of our community members spotted in our documentation. We should
Mhm.
update it because that is, for example, the source of truth, mainly the documentation, where mostly every user will check that page. And we need to make sure that we listen from every single issues that they raise, prioritize them as to which one is going to give the most value, and then try to deliver it back to them. Because I think it's like a partnership as well. They can definitely help us do some form of advocacies because I know in a championship program, we've got like really active members who's like an extension of the company as well. And we don't give them monetary value, but we provide them with other ways to really show that we care. And I think
Mhm.
listening to them, forming that relationship, helping them with even building their personal brand, I think that's a really important aspect. And I think the whole community aspect of it is a really great start to have your place in whichever community you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. And I do love that it comes down to your champions, right? Everybody, every community has that one person who's just really impassioned to begin with, and they're all on board. So, like, help them be all on board. If you can help them grow in that role and help them stay excited about it and not get burnt out by it, awesome, right?
Mhm. I
I
do
think
think though that, oh sorry, Nicole, but I do think though that like just in relation to what Fernando is asking, I think keeping people engaged is a bit harder in the sense in a sense of you have to continue build that relationship. You have to think of ways on how you can continue to motivate their intrinsic like motivation of even joining like a championship program in the first place, because I think once they are part of that program, there needs to be some experimentation, some um different like formats that, like for example today we did a champions call. That was the first time that we've done it, and the idea is we want to provide our champions a sneak peek access of what's upcoming in the next release, and at least it gives them this sort of like exclusivity feeling that, oh, this is what's coming. So I think thinking of ways to keep them engaged, in some ways I think it could be harder because you really have to consider what individual, for example person, wants in terms of why they joined the program, and then you make sure that you're there to support them in every other like possible way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I really like that you brought up the why that somebody is there.
Mm.
Because the why might be, look, I just want to come in and find the answer that I'm looking for and then get out of town, right? I don't want to like linger in a forum or have discussions. But some people really want that sense of belonging and an actual sense of community. And so building in things like a coffee break channel where people can come in and just talk about stuff that's not work, or a section in your forum that's like, hey, if you also like tabletop role playing, like there's more than one of us here, like we would love to talk about that stuff too. Like, yeah, and building those things that people come for when I just need 5 minutes of clarity so that I can get on with my day. But other things that are like, I wonder if Nicole's playing D&D today. Like maybe I should get a hold of her.
Definitely every week. I play 3 games a week, so
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. You play more than I do.
We have another comment from Fernando Kobayashi who says, and about this balance between your personal brand and your employer's brand. Yeah, that is really difficult because I think part of developer relations or developer advocacy is that we are actually part of that community. And so it's not as easy to say where our employer begins, or for example, in Marie's and my case,
Mhm.
where does the Grafana community begin and where does our community end? It's not really that clear because there's overlap.
Absolutely. And it is really, it can be with certain companies, it can be very difficult to kind of mash your personal brand with your employer's brand and your own voice and opinion, especially if they're not the same as the companies and you have to kind of censor yourself a little bit. But I think those of us that work in such a public facing section of tech, if there's not a good fit between your employer and your personal brand, it's probably not going to work long term anyway, because you're not as apt to be active in that community and you're not, vibing with like, okay, I love all the ethics that are going on in this company. And so it's really hard to advocate for something that you don't completely advocate for. I will never recommend software to somebody if I'm not like, this is what I use every day. Like, not because I work here, but because I chose to use this software. Like, I'm not going to try to sell you on the benefits of something that I secretly hate. I just don't think it's possible to do that.
Yeah, it sort of communicates that feeling of not really being genuine, and that can really um provide an impact into your brand or into your employer's brand. But I think now that we're on the subject of, because I think this falls into the category of misusing the community and not in the right way or something. Um, what other ways out there, because like I think not really being genuine and you're only really part of the community because of, I don't know, this company has said, hey, we're gonna pay you this amount if you talk about us or if you write in a blog post. And
Mhm.
how do you balance that, like, because I think advocacy really, it's not, it's like most of us, we do it like outside work. I think Nicole and I are quite lucky that it is now
Absolutely.
part of our work. But for example, with the championship program, it is a role, or it is something that champions do outside. So
Mhm.
how do you, like, how can you misuse the community in like different ways?
Oh my gosh. I think the one that happens the most frequently is asking for people to do things for you without compensation, right? People will volunteer to do things for you. And I always feel like there's a rough line between like, thank you so much for always volunteering to do this, but like, I know it's a big ask. So let me get somebody else to work on it. you know so I think finding that balance between volunteers and giving them compensation of some sort, a gift card, drawings for poll responses, anything that can give back a little bit of like, we really do appreciate you, and your time isn't free, right? We live in a capitalistic society, and you're giving extra time outside of your own duties and your own responsibilities to this. So making sure they know that they are not just being abused for this. like, 'cause that's an easy way for you to lose your champions, right? If I feel like, okay, I've written 3 blog posts for them, I'm done with this. Right? Or I spoke at a conference for them, but I haven't heard from them since. So maintaining those relationships, don't over stress and overwork your people. So giving them the ability and the power to say no and be okay with that, I think is really, really powerful when it comes to not abusing your communities. One of the other things that I think is super important is moderation, right? You have to have somebody in your community that's going to go, you know what? That is not behavior that we stand for. We don't like that language. We don't like abusive people. Um, Hit the bricks. you know, I've given you your warnings and this is just not working out for us. Like, you can't do this here. And so creating that safe space for people to actually come in and ask questions and be okay with being like, I know this is a dumb question. No, it's not. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Right? That's, I really honestly believe that. If you are asking it, 1,000 other people are. You're just the brave one to do it. And so making sure that there's not somebody that comes in and goes, yeah, that is a dumb question. Mm-mm, not okay. Not in my community. so,
You're touching on something that I think is really important, but often is overlooked, especially in these sort of organic communities. Because when a community forms, I think the ideal is that it kind of just happens without anyone really meaning it, and, which is great. But the thing that I think we need to stress is the communication up front of like, these are the boundaries. This is what the community is for. This is its purpose. These are the behaviors that we will and won't accept, like a code of
mhm,
conduct. And I think this ties into the previous question from Fernando about separating between your personal and your company brand, because it's also just about communication. So, in terms of like the company brand, it could be in the sense of a code of conduct, but there's also the communication between you and the company to say, like, hey, this is what's okay and what's not okay. This sort of thing is okay to do on company time, this is not. That could be a contract, or
absolutely.
in Marie and my case, this whole Adobo and Avocados thing, we're doing it on company time. It is an OKR for us. It is one of our goals that we're very upfront about it, because we need to be transparent that, hey, we're actually using company resources and company time to do this. But in
Yeah.
terms of you personally, that could also be something like an ethics statement. So I personally have an ethics statement where I clearly state, like, these are the cases where I am speaking on behalf of Grafana. These are the cases where I'm speaking on behalf of me. This is when I will accept money. This is when I won't accept money. When I do accept money for sponsorship or whatever, these are the requirements. Like, just being open
Oh
about
yeah.
your stances on things, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, and I really like that you use the word transparency. Like that has always been one of the most important things to me. I've worked for way more people than I would like to admit to that they don't share information. It's kind of like throwing darts in the dark. You have no idea what you're doing or if you're providing any actual value because nobody communicates and you have no idea what's going on. So having that transparency, and I'm a huge fan of like write it down. If you didn't document it somewhere, it didn't really happen because any one of us could be sick tomorrow, get laid off, you know, whatever the case may be, that, if I'm not here tomorrow, somebody needs to know what's going on. And so that might mean, here's where you find the code of conduct. It might mean I've been having this conversation with so and so and it's still unresolved, so please follow up with them next week. Um, anything like that, that there's a kind of a paper trail, digitally speaking, so that, we know what's happening and we know what the goal is and we know where we're going.
I really agree with all of that points, and I'm taking like mental notes because I also want to make sure that within the community that we are building, whether that's the K6 champions or whether it's this Adobo and Avocados, because I think this is starting to be a community that Nicole and I are really trying to build, and we're constantly trying to make improvements to it, getting like different guests and talk about different topics, not just the technical stuff, but it's really about the relationship piece. It's
Mhm.
not about the tools, not about the technical stuff, but at like bottom line, it all comes down to how you treat that other person. So it's yeah, it's such a good topic that I'm taking mental notes here of like what I'm gonna do
Love
for
that.
like the
But
different
I
communities that
do
I'm
think,
part
Nicole, you said that it happens very organically, and I do think that's right. It does grow very organically, but that doesn't mean you can't apply like, a little bit of strategy to
of. Mm,
that organic growth, right? If you know that you're wanting more viewers on this so you can get more people seeing it, and more comments and more conversations, then like, you know, have everybody share it out. Like it's
mm,
okay to ask for the things that you need in your community. So it's like, I really want more feedback on this presentation I gave. I put it on YouTube. Please let me know what you think.
mhm,
you know, it's so okay to ask for that feedback. Little brief polls. What would you like our next topic to be? What documentation do you think is the worst on our website? Any of those things that get people going, oh, now that you mention it, I really hate the page on installation. Never works for me. Like,
mhm.
that's valuable feedback that you can then make action items out of. And so I love going and asking those, just like they call the 5-second question, like, right? So I stop you in the hall at a conference and say, hey, if I could do any one thing to fix it for you right now, what would it be? Like,
I know we're running up on time, but I really want to ask a question. Do you have any tools that you can recommend that you use for keeping track of all of these things that different people from maybe different platforms and slightly different communities tell you? Like, do you use something that helps you identify people that are engaged, but also lets you come up with feature requests or issues and documentation? Like, where do you put all that?
yeah, so engagement's a little bit more difficult. I have a couple of different pieces of software and it kind of depends on where your community lives. But as far as like feature requests and issues and things like that, I track it like I do software development. I put everything on a backlog and I prioritize it. And I can take it back to my product developers and say, here's the things that I've been told are the most important. I got with our CSMs and they've said, oh yeah, we get that phone call every day. you know, so we bumped it up to the top, and I can use my internal team members to help prioritize, what content needs to go out or what features need to be fixed, or nobody really cares if we can have dark mode because they really just want the save function to work all the time. Like, those little things that you're like, I know it doesn't break all the time, but it's enough that people are like, if you could fix this, that would be great. Like, and so I just treat it like I would software bugs almost, where I put them on a backlog, and then if something comes up and I can go, wait, I have that on the backlog, let me move it further up to the top.
Mm.
Um,
Do we need a backlog, Nicole, for Adobo and Avocados?
Yeah, probably. But I think it's okay when it's just you. So like I have my own personal community and I track that personally because I don't have anyone else. But like when
mhm.
you start to get into a company or even two people, it's like we got to think about how we can both add to this thing in a central
Yeah.
repository. I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why I just started using I use Asana. I sort them into a backlog, and then I can set my week kind of like you would a software sprint, where I say, okay, this is what I'm going to work on this week. I have this meeting with so and so about this feature, and I'm going to try to get this blog out, and I'm going to do this, and I plan my week that way. And that way, if something comes up from the system, whatever Discord or Discourse or any of those community ventures comes up, and I'm like, ooh, okay, whatever our last release was, I've had 10 people come to me with the same problem. I can pull that directly onto my board and say that we're doing this first. So.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time, but Tara, one question that Nicole and I always ask our guests is, if you have one piece of advice to anyone out there who wants to have a career in tech, what would that be?
Oh, just do it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything about that language or everything about, that software. Just jump in. None of us know. We're just really good at Google.
Yeah.
Like, we all look super knowledgeable. And some people are, for sure. But really, we're all just good at figuring it out. So you don't feel like you have to be, perfectly versed at everything in, C#. Just do it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Fernando, for tuning with us today. Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for the
really
good
great.
question.
Yeah. But this is it for today's episode. Thank you so much, Tara, for
Yeah.
sharing what it's like to be a community builder and how we can help and foster communities the right way. Next week, I think we'll be back with a different guest. So make sure to watch that episode. Nicole and I are also thinking of like experimenting on a few things. So maybe we'll have like more than one guest. We don't know, but yeah, it's an exciting year for Adobo and Avocados. And yeah, I hope that this has been useful. It was really useful, like for me at least.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
feel free to reach out anytime. I love talking about this stuff. I love nerding out over tech and Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of stuff. So
Awesome. Well, thank you
thank you
so
so much.
much and
Yeah.
take care all. Bye bye.
Thank you for
Thanks
having me.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.